in China. In those days, it was not unusual for you to apprentice yourself to a physician. And I had a near kinsman of mine, Dr. Hardy, a very wonderful fellow, very, very sweet Christian man, but he was also quite forgetful. The thing that he forgot most was my wages. I went to live with him, and I had made a promise that I would never ask him for money. I made a promise that I would pray to God, and God would remind him. I thought, if I cannot trust the Lord here in England, so close to home, in the very bosom of my family, how was I to trust the Lord so far away in China? And so it was one evening very late on a Saturday. I was working earnestly, not because I was so diligent, but I could not face my landlady's outstretched palm into which I could put no money. I had no money at all. So there I was, working over a concoction of medicines. Father, please remind him. Oh, Lord, please, I need some money. I must pay my landlady. She had all of these orphans there. She was a widow. Father, please. And Dr. Hardy came. Taylor, he said, Taylor, do I not owe you some money? Yes, sir. How much money, Taylor? We always know exactly how much money someone owes us, do we not? And so I told him. He said, oh, Taylor, I do not have that much money about me. I will write you a check for it. I will even pay you to go to the bank on the very first thing on Monday morning. How is that for fair? At that moment, the medicine boiled over in the tube, and I rushed out to allow the medicine and myself to cool down. I did not need the money Monday morning. I needed it now, tonight. It was already overdue. My landlady needed the money. Did God not understand? I think there is no greater disappointment than the disappointment of a very young Christian who believes that God has failed him. I went back in. I began the final preparations on the medicine. My heart was very cold and hard indeed. I believed that God had failed, that he had not kept his promise. By now it was very late, and I heard a knock at the door and some muffled voices. Soon Dr. Hardy came in with a story so very strange, so very odd, that I forgot my own sulks, my own difficulties. He told me how the most wealthy man in our village, a man with horses, carriages, thousands of acres of property, that this man had walked late in the evening by himself when he could have sent a servant to pay his account in cash. How very odd. What a strange thing for him to do. And then Dr. Hardy asked me again how much it was that he owed me, and I told him. And it was very nearly to the halfpenny that the man had paid. You see, God had not failed me. I had failed him. I had failed to cast all of my care upon him. I went on from there, heading toward London. I was living in a very picturesque part of the city. It was called Drainside. You can imagine what a lovely place it must have been. It was a part of the Thames estuary, and it was a drainage ditch that rose and fell with the tide, and I often wondered if the people had washed up there with the tide at some point in time. I was living very frugally by now. I would have oatmeal, skilly-gally, the sailors call it. I would have it hot for my breakfast and cold for my supper. I was sleeping on a mat of straw. I was trying to emulate as much of the conditions in China as I would face. I did not know. And sometimes for a change, I would have it hot for supper and cold for breakfast. The oatmeal, not the straw mat. Although the tastes were very similar. By this time, I had in my possession half a crown. That is, in American money, is approximately 50 cents. Not a great deal of money, but in those days it would go quite far. And as I said, I was living very frugally, and it would see me through for perhaps a fortnight. I was working late on a Saturday evening, writing a sermon that I was going to preach on the street corner the very next Sunday morning. That was my practice, my habit. I would preach on the street corners, and sometimes people would listen, most often not, and sometimes they would throw things. Never food. I often wish they had thrown food. I could have used that. But there I was, and again, knock at the door. It was an Irishman. He said, could I come? He heard that I was a doctor. I said, sir, I am not a doctor yet. He said he couldn't afford a doctor, but he thought I might do. That's how we would like to be known, that we might do, not that we're good at something, but that we might do. I followed him quite reluctantly. By now, the fog had closed in, and we wound our way through the narrow streets. We climbed some stairs. He had told me along the way that he had lost his job. He had told me that his wife was ill. Death has its own particular smell. She was not ill, she was dying. She had been delivered of an infant. She had continued to hemorrhage. She had lost a great deal of blood. She could not nurse the infant. It, too, was dying. But as I appeared around the room, I saw there in the protruding eyes and distended bellies the signs of starvation of his 5 other children. I am not proud of what I did, but I wish for you to know. I began to upbraid him. How could you allow yourself to get into such difficulty? Why did you not find a better job? Why did you not send your children to the workhouse? Then I took refuge in that last bastion of false piety. I will pray for you, I said. My prayers were like those given in the book of James, which say, go thy way, be warmed and filled, and yet you give nothing for the body. What good is that? They got no higher than the ceiling. Finally, the Holy Spirit smote my heart. I pulled that tiny coin from my pocket. I said, here, quickly purchase these medicines and also some milk and bread and cheese and coal. We must keep your family warm. Here, quickly, and run. You must find the pharmacist. You must wake him if he is asleep. I began to tend to his wife. We were able to stop the bleeding. The human body's ability to mend itself is, to me, a wondrous miracle in and of itself, that you can cut your finger and it will heal. Is a glorious design. His wife began to recover. She was able to nurse the infant. It too began to recover. When his other children had something in their tummies, they also recovered. And although I left there lighter of pocket, I was much lighter of heart. When I arrived at my humble lodgings, I found an envelope there with my name upon it. There was no other inscription. I cannot tell you from whence it came, but in it was a pair of white kidskin gloves and also a gold sovereign. The Lord had multiplied my tiny coin 400 times. This is the part of our God. This is what he means. I will be with you always, even to the end of the world. Now I was attending medical school. I was lodging with my cousin, who was preparing to become a lawyer, a barrister. And in your first year of medical school, you work on a cadaver. You work on the body of someone who is deceased. And I can assure you it is much safer to practice medicine upon someone who is dead already than to practice medicine upon someone who would be dead very shortly, I am certain. But these were people who had died without a name, without a family. My particular cadaver had died of a virulent fever. And our instructor had told us that upon no account, if we had any cut or scratch upon our hands or our face, were we to work. The fever was so contagious. I had pricked my thumb the night before. I am much better with stitches in skin than I am in socks. But I thought, well, he doesn't mean a pinprick. But it is nearly gone. It is almost gone. I passed out. When I woke, my instructor, a very dour Scot, splashed some water in my face. Taylor, what are your symptoms? He said. My equilibrium was gone. I was very dizzy. My tongue was very dry. A fever swept over my body. I began to sweat, and then suddenly chills. I began to shiver uncontrollably. He checked my pulse. He looked in my eyes, my mouth. He said, Taylor, you have this fever. My only advice to you is to make your life right with God and man, because you're going to die. You have approximately 6 weeks to live. I was not 21, and my death sentence had been pronounced. He had told me to take a carriage back to my apartments that I was now sharing with my cousin, that I could not afford such an expense. I passed out many times along the way. Upon the very doorstep, I passed out again. The charwoman, the cleaning lady, she found me there. She helped me up the stairs, and I sought to share Jesus Christ with her. I thought, Lord, would you give me one more soul before I die? And I remember thinking, I will not see China now. I will not be able to share the good news of Jesus Christ with these people.